way from the start, I can feel it in my heart, like all the way from the start. Hey, what's going on out there? It's Sean Devine, and today I want to do a new tutorial for you guys. And I'm going to mix a hip hop verse once again, but this one I'm going to actually include the Logic Pro X session file after we finish, so that if you're a Logic Pro X user, you can download it, go through the settings, figure out exactly what we did with the plugins, and you can even save them and use them on your own vocals or files. So hopefully that'll be helpful. And then also, many of you have had a lot of concerns about not having the same plugins that I do for the mixes, and feeling like you can't get a pro sound and a good blend using stock plugins. So for this, I'm going to use just Logic Pro X stock plugins. And no matter what DAW you use, you're going to have similar tools. So this is really just going to be a good example of how to use these on a very basic, essential level, and be able to get a pro blend, a pro sound, a pro mix for your vocals. So let's jump right in here. I'm going to go ahead and just play the verse back, just dry as it was recorded, just so that you can get a feel for what we have here. So here we go.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose sleeves, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, I'll be gone. Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed, and I've waited for your approval and appreciation, and got a slap to the face. Leave your rebuttal to that statement baseless, but reality to you is the most dreaded evidence that you've been about #1 ever since. So looking my way and making a remark, unless it's with the utmost, you got no room for that. Truth to you is this moment, you blink, it flies by, stretch your palms, hope it grabs. You let it visit, but can't convince it. All you need is it to last, but it doesn't. So when you put your trust in.
All right, so that's the verse recording that we're working with. And the first thing that I want to cover in this tutorial is a concern that, again, many of you have addressed on my channel, is that you download a beat from a producer, and when you put it in your session, it's already at like commercial levels. It's already essentially mastered, which is the case with this beat as well. And a lot of you are finding it challenging to get your vocals to blend and kind of sit on top of the beat when they're really loud like that. And the first thing that you want to do is you want to reach for the volume and turn it down, or you want to limit the beat. The problem with that is, once you want to try to master the song with a beat that's already mastered, you're gonna pretty much smash all the transients, because you're gonna be over limiting it. The beat might have already been limited. So by the time you go in and start throwing a bunch of mastering plugins on your master bus with your vocals on it, the music just gets destroyed. So you don't want to do that. If you have a single track of the beat and it's already mixed, it's already at commercial levels, just leave it. And we're going to use compression, EQ, and some of these other mixing techniques to get your vocals to be at the same commercial levels and to sit on top of the beat without having to do, a lot of mastering and all those kind of processes at this point. So if you want to be more aware of where things are level-wise, just use a metering plugin. Or if you have something on your audio interface, you can use that as well. But Logic has a multimeter, so we're just going to throw that onto our stereo bus. And I like to refer to RMS. I think that's just the easiest way to measure where you're at level-wise. So let me just play it back at the loudest point.
Baseless, but reality to you is the most dreaded evidence that you've been about #1 ever since.
So if you look at this number right here, minus 8.3 RMS, that gives you a good sense of where you are. And this is kind of something with experience that you just learn where you need to be in terms of being competitive commercially. And so if you want to just throw in like a popular MP3, something you got off iTunes, into a session and just see where it is RMS wise, just so that you can keep it comparable, that's one way to do it. But again, just looking at that number, I can tell, this beat is where it needs to be level wise to compete. So that's all good. So we'll leave the multimeter on. Again, you can just use that throughout to kind of see where things are. So let's jump in and start mixing our verse. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mute some of these other layers. As you can see, we have like a backing layer, which is just basically a duplicate of the main just to give it some thickness. We've also got a backing high, and this is where he's almost kind of yelling.
Lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake.
And we caught a little bit of room ambience with that just so that we can mix it in, and that'll give it a cool effect. And then we just have two dub or punch layers that we're going to use to emphasize certain words. And I'm going to show you some cool ways that we can use these to do that. But let's just work with the main layer for right now. I'll mute these other ones. And let's see. The first thing you want to do is just look at the waveform. Again, I've talked about this in some other tutorials on my channel, but just kind of see where the dynamics are. And just really by looking at it, you can see with the peaks and lulls, kind of how much compression you may have to do. And, you know, it depends on the flavor that you're wanting to add to the sound as well. But in terms of just leveling it out, if it's all over the place, if there's a bunch of peaks and valleys in it, you can pretty much assume you're going to need to compress it more just to keep, you know, the softer parts up front and the louder parts under control. So let's go ahead and first thing we should do is we should send it to a bus. Now, some of you have probably just been going in here and smacking plugins on the channels. I'm going to show you why running our verse to a bus, or any channel for that matter, to buses is more convenient and it's more efficient, because what's going to happen is we may have, you know, another track that we want to send to the same bus with the same insert effects. So for instance, this backing layer, I'll probably send to the same bus as the lead layer, and rather than just copying, you know, the plugins over and eating up a lot of CPU doing that, we can just use busing. So we send it to bus 1, and let's go ahead and pull the compressor, stock compressor. There's a lot of different compression types and kind of styles and flavors, but we're just going to stick with the Platinum Digital, the default one. And let's just go ahead and let's turn this threshold to 0. That's the first thing that we're going to be messing with. You want to turn the ratio up a little bit just so that we can see the compressor reacting with the signal. But let me just play this back. So right now you can see it's doing nothing because the threshold is at 0 and we're not catching the audio signal yet. So we're going to slowly bring that up, and you'll be able to watch it as it engages. So right there, we're just barely catching it. Not a lot of compression going on.
Voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's
okay, so we should definitely talk about this makeup gain. Let's turn auto gain off.
voices of doubt and unbelief never.
But what this is for is anytime you're compressing a signal, or most of the times when we have a higher ratio, it's going to make the signal quieter. Just naturally, because it's making the louder parts quieter. It's bringing up the softer ones a little bit. But our level is definitely getting quieter right now. So we're going to use the makeup gain to bring everything back up to where it needs to be. The compressed signal, that is.
Voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, how we gone? Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk about knee settings today. You can play with that. But let's just talk about attack and release. For the hip-hop vocal, as I've talked about before, we want to do something quick. For this style of vocal, I want a fast attack.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But
a little bit slower release. And these are things that you're just going to have to play with over time, and you'll kind of get a feel for what they're doing. But again, you'll have these settings in the session file, so if you want to mess with them.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in.
You've also got a mix knob in this compressor. And I really like having the mix because this is allowing you to mix the dry signal in with the compressed signal. I'm not going to use that today, but again, something you may want to mess with to get a different style and flavor of sound. So right now, just with threshold ratio and some of these attack and release settings, you can hear that the vocal is sitting pretty well on top of the beat already. We haven't EQ'd it or anything.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, how we gone? Consider that when the lift.
Okay, another thing to note, a lot of you have been really worried about the red or the clipping in some of the tutorials. If you can't hear it distorting, this is not necessarily a bad thing. The DAWs just have different ways of detecting clipping or peaking in the digital world. And again, it's not always going to be audible, so you just kind of have to use your ears to see if, it's affecting the sound in a bad way. And if it's not, it's okay if it's clipping. Our beat's really loud, so we're having to push the vocal a little bit to get it on top of it.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never.
Do be careful with that though, because if you can't hear distortion or you can't tell it's clipping, that could get you into trouble. So you just have to listen really closely. But let's go ahead and send this verse back to the same bus. We're just going to mix that in subtly. So
those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, how we gone? Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited for your approval and
all right, so that sounds pretty good on the compressed signal. One thing that we should probably do is what I call just like a preliminary EQ. Before it goes to the compressor, I like to just take out all these lows, so that's not really affecting the compression as much. So let's just do that.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, how we gone? Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priority.
All right, so now let's do some EQ here. And let's do the linear phase EQ.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, how we gone? Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand wave.
I'm just rolling off some of this, from like 200 up. Just a little bit of a bump there.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on.
A lot of 200, from like 200 to 500, can give your vocals a really boxy sound. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's pleasant, but other times it's just kind of like a room boxy, and so you want to get rid of some of that.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaves.
And we're gonna boost up here pretty heavily at 10. And you'll hear as I do this, it's going to make the S's pretty harsh, but we're gonna deal with that in just a second.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake.
Let's go ahead and pull out the de-esser here. And let's just bring up this reduce presence preset and we'll adjust it accordingly.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide.
So I really like to kind of keep my EQ and my de-esser up and just really play with these to taste, because based upon what the de-esser is doing, you may need to push the EQ a little bit as it goes in, and it just affects the sound in different ways. So you want to make sure that you're kind of compensating for the de-essing.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, how we gone? Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited for your approval and appreciation. Got a slap to the face, leave your rebuttal to that statement baseless. Cause reality to you is the most dreaded evidence that you've been about number one ever since. sense. So look in my way
And again, as we EQ, we may need to go back to the compressor, make some adjustments. It's not always going to be just, compression's done, go to EQ. EQ's done, go to de-essing. You're going to have to kind of go back and forth because they do affect each other.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, how we gone? Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited for your approval and appreciation.
So let's throw in this high one, and just to make it easy, I'm going to put that on our same bus here.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take baseless. Cause reality to you is the most dreaded evidence that you've been about #1 ever since. So look in my way and making a remark, unless it's with the utmost, you got no room for that. Truth to you is this moment, you blink, it flies by. Stretch your palms, hope it grasps. You let it visit, but can't convince it. All you need is it to last, but it doesn't. So what do you put your trust in? Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, how we gone? Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited for your approval and appreciation. Got a slap to the face, leave your rebuttal to that statement baseless. Cause reality to you is the most dreaded evidence that you've been about #1 ever since. So look in my way and making a remark, unless it's with the utmost, you got no room for that. Truth to you is this moment, you blink, it flies by. Stretch your...
All right, so it's sitting pretty well in the pocket. Let's go ahead and let's deal with the punches. So I'm going to send those to bus 2. And we'll deal with those accordingly. Now, couple of tricks here is we could use both of these, and what I would normally do is I get the artist just to do like a duplicate of the punches and then just pan them, hard pan them, so it'll give it kind of a wide sounding effect.
Belief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that...
Which is pretty cool, but I'm going to show you something different today, because if you look at it, the takes are a little bit different anyway. So I would just have to kind of cut up some stuff, but let's just get rid of that one. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to show you a trick we can do to make these sound really wide with the same take. So if we duplicate that, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pitch shifter on here. And then I'm going to shift this one just subtly. So this is on semitones now. Let's do like 10 cents or so. Mix it 100.
It's a doubt and unbelief never cease. Never cease. Never cease. Never cease.
We're just going to make them a little bit different. And then I'm going to put a sample delay on it. So we're just going to be adding just a tiny bit of delay to one side of the signal. It's going to create a little bit of a stereo spread.
Never cease. Never cease. Loose leaf. Wide awake. Take. Give in. What's missing? Gone. Hat off.
So it's just a different effect. Next, we're going to go ahead and compress these dubs here.
Belief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do that.
So we're going to do a really high ratio. We want these to be very upfront.
Belief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, how we gone? Consider that when they lifted your hat.
All right, so then let's EQ them a little bit.
Belief unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, I'll be gone. Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited for your approval and appreciation. Got a slap to the face, leave your rebuttal to that statement baseless. Cause reality to you is the most dreaded evidence that you've been about #1 ever since. So looking my way and making a remark, unless it's with the utmost, you got no room for that. Truth to you is this moment, you blink, it flies by.
Let's play with the pitch a little bit here. So I'm gonna mute the beat real quick.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, I'll be gone. Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited.
Sounds pretty good. So the next thing, let's do some a little bit of reverb. We're just gonna add a sense of space to the main vocal. So I'm just gonna go to our bus and then I'm gonna send the signal to another bus, which is going to be our reverb. So we'll do a main verb. This is verse main and verse dub. Okay, so now let's put a reverb on here. Let's just use the platinum verb. And then I'm going to be EQing the reverb.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, I'll be gone.
So it's way too big of a space right now, but again, I just want to roll off the highs and the lows so that we're just getting some of that mid for the reverb itself. So now let's open that up and let's just play with the sound. We need to make it a smaller space.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, I'll be gone. Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited for your approval and appreciation. Got a slap to the face, leave your rebuttal to that statement baseless. Cause reality to you is the most dreaded evidence that you've been about #1 ever.
That sounds pretty cool. Just gives it a little bit of a open space kind of feel. Now let's send our main to another bus here, and we'll call this delay. And what we're going to do is we're going to give it a little bit of a stereo delay just to widen the sound of the vocal. And we're going to mix it in very, very subtly.
Those voices of doubt and unbelief. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, I'll be gone. Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited for your approval and appreciation. Got a slap to the face, leave your rebuttal to that statement baseless. Cause reality to you is the most dreaded evidence that you've been about #1 ever since. So looking my way and making a remark, unless it's with the utmost, you got no room for that. Truth to you is this moment, you blink, it flies by. Stretch your palms, hope it grasps. You let it visit, but can't convince it. All you need is it to last, but it doesn't. So what do you put your trust in? Those voices of doubt and unbelief never cease. I lose sleep on loose leaf, so that means I'm wide awake while they do their best to take and never give in. But when you look for what's missing, I'll be gone. Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed and I've waited for your approval and appreciation. Got a slap to the face, leave your rebuttal to that statement baseless. Cause reality to you is the most dreaded evidence.
So that sounded pretty good right now. Now, again, if you all are concerned about this red or the clipping on your master, you can put, some kind of master limiter on there, but don't put anything on there that's going to affect the transient. So let's just put an adaptive limiter, turn the gain down, and this is going to add a little bit of a delay to my vocal, but let me turn that on, and just put it at -0.1. So it's just not going to let anything above that.
How we gone? Consider that when they lifted your hat off, my hand waving. Your priorities have been addressed, and I've waited for your approval and appreciation. Got a slap to the face, leave your rebuttal to that statement baseless. Cause reality to you is the most dreaded evidence that you've been about #1.
So as you can hear, we have a vocal that is sitting very up front, right on top of the beat, and we didn't have to turn the beat down or do anything. It's at commercial levels, and we're going to be able to compete, and everything is sounding very clear. So again, I'm going to include this session file. So if you want to go through, mess with the settings a little bit, use the change for something else, that's cool. And if you have any questions or comments about the video, be sure and leave them below, and we'll talk to you soon.